The beauty of sports is that we all come to expect the unexpected. And we all have our ideas about just how the 23-24 basketball season is going to go for North Carolina. But Pac Kilby, what if things didn't go exactly as expected? That's exactly what we're talking about today. It's our first ever What If Wednesday.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, it's Wednesday, October 4th, 2023. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Schade. Joining me as he does every midweek is our guy, Coach Pac Kilby, and we want to thank you for joining us to make Locked On Tar Heels your first listen or watch of the day. Coming up on the show today, I said it in the cold open, we're doing what we're calling What If Wednesday. I've got this bowl in my hand. If you're watching, you can see it. If you're listening, you can hear me shaking it. I've got a bunch of cards in here with what if scenarios. So what if blank happens? So I'm going to pull one out, and then Pac and I are just going to answer it. So we're going to do, 3 segments on the show. We're going to answer 3 questions. What do you think about that, Pac?
Oh, I'm excited. I think it's going to be awesome.
I think so too. I'm looking forward to it. By the way, if as you watch this show, you've got ideas, because we're going to do this more often. This is not a one-off thing. We both think it's going to be a lot of fun. So if you've got some ideas for a what if, send them in. If you join the Discord, you can drop them in there. You can tweet at us. You can email the show, lockedontarheels@gmail.com, whatever you want to do. So, Pac, I'm ready to just dive straight into this thing. What about you?
I'm ready.
All right, let's hit it. Let me pull out one for us. All right, I got one. And it says, what if Elliot Cadeau takes a while to fully adjust? Oh, Pac, I think this is a great one. We're all assuming that Elliot Cadeau is going to come in and be ready to hit it right out of the gate. But we know that freshmen, especially those who reclass, don't have a great track record in college basketball. Now, I know Elliot Cadeau is, of the age to actually be a freshman in this class, but he's not been playing with that class. So what do you think about what if Elliot Cadeau takes a while to fully adjust?
Well, that's certainly a big what if. But I also, my own personal thoughts on Cadeau is that I'm kind of taking more of a wait and see approach, more so than buying into the hype anyways. And that to me is kind of what you just mentioned. It's really tough to come into college basketball, especially at a program like UNC, and just, hit the ground running like you never missed a beat, and so honestly, I kind of expect him to take a little bit to adjust, but
kind of live with those lumps, I guess, a little bit.
You have to. And here's the thing, looking at the long term, you may live with some bumps going through December, but when January hits, and this is kind of what we tell our players at the high school level, you're not a freshman anymore. You're a sophomore. We expect you to play like that. We need you to play like that. And we need that. But if it does take him a while to fully adjust, and it's truly January and we're in the conference play before we get the true Cadeau, then we're going to have potentially to take some lumps against a really tough non-conference schedule. And it makes our depth all the more important. And, what really sticks out to me when I think about this question is how impactful can or will Paxton Wojcik be?
Why so? Why do you say that?
And what sticks out to me there is if Cadeau is taking a bit to adjust, then we can still rock with RJ at the 1, but we'll need other options in there. And Paxton is somebody that sticks out to me as, it could look like RJ, Paxton, Ryan Cormack, Harrison Ingram, Armando, like a group, that 5 on the floor, and he becomes all the more important. And so
that's true.
I just, when I think about will he take a while to adjust, my mind immediately turns to Wojcik and Seth Trimble. And will those guys be ready to help out and contribute and help fill that gap until Cadeau does fully adjust?
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember back to what was it like for Kobe? What was it like for Cole Anthony? What was it like for Caleb and RJ? Because we've had multiple guys who have been tasked with leading the charge in recent years. And I know there's always that, man, it is so tough being the point guard, especially as a freshman in the Roy Williams era. I'm trying to think of, like, we don't really know that yet in the Hubert Davis era, right? Like, is it going to be the same thing where it's as tough to be the freshman point guard for Hubert Davis as it was to pick up the Roy Williams system? So that's going to be an interesting thing to watch happen. But it feels like thinking of those three most recent ones with Kobe and Cole and RJ / Caleb, who do you think adjusted best to being a freshman point guard? Pac, I'm trying to think back on it in real time.
Yeah. I think Kobe White definitely adjusted the best to it.
And to be fair, he had the most talent around him. Let's say that too.
And that's why I feel good about Cadeau, is he is going to be surrounded by a true solid post player that will help relieve pressure in the half court.
A true solid post player who just happens to be the best, or the most prolific rebounder in program history.
Yeah, he's all right. And then, he's got some senior leadership around him, and RJ.
That's huge.
Cormac has got the experience. Harrison's got experience. So those things are really, really going to help Cadeau. And I like what you mentioned. It's not the traditional Roy Williams secondary break sets into an offense that made it very, the point guard shouldered a lot of the load in that system. This system is definitely a little bit different, especially since we've kind of gone away from that secondary break. So that helps relieve some of that pressure. But I also would like to see us get back to it. And I've heard some rumblings that maybe we will. And so if that's the case, then maybe he does have a heavy load as the point guard, and it will take some time to adjust. It's going to be really interesting to see.
Here's another key factor. There's a new assistant coach on the bench, and his name is Marcus Paige. I think he will be critical for this. He's somebody else who, like Elliot for a long time has been thinking, I'm going to be the point guard in 2024-25. The reclass kind of step into things earlier than he expects. That was Marcus's story, right? He expects to come in and learn behind Kendall Marshall for at least a year. And Kendall's going to go to the league now. Oh, cool. Here we go. Right. So both of them kind of have to adjust to being the point guard earlier than they originally expected. And so I think Marcus has a very unique point of view on this. And so as Elliot, whatever level of adjustment period he has, I think Marcus is probably the single best person to be able to pour wisdom into him and to be out running at practices with him. I think is part of like Coach Robinson and I have talked about this a little bit, like maybe Coach Davis won't bring in more walk-ons because you got guys like Marcus who can play in practice with them, and so all of that I think is a factor in Elliot as well.
Yeah, and if we could go back to kind of the talk about Kobe and Cole Anthony and those guys, the difference for me there is kind of like what you mentioned. I think that Elliot is going to have more talent around him than Kobe. Well, maybe not Kobe, but then Cole Anthony.
But Cole and RJ and Caleb, yeah.
Yes, but the one thing is those guys were really scoring point guards.
That's right.
And Cadeau is not really that. It's not that he can't. It's just that's not his game. He's not a score-first type of guy.
Right.
And I think that's a good thing, especially for this group that we have. We need to see him take on more of an early Kendall Marshall type role, more so than a Cole Anthony type role, where he's just, real shot heavy and looking to score all the time. We want that Kendall Marshall, push the break, look to pitch ahead, create for others, see what crazy amount of assists you can get in each game type of Kendall Marshall. That's what we need from Elliot Cadeau. And I don't know how early we get it or how late in the season we get it, but I know if we get it at some point, it's going to make us real dangerous.
That's right. And I think we might have to just take some of those lumps along the way. You live with some of the bad, some of the learning curve to get all that good. And there's a lot of good to get out of him. So to answer our question, what if Elliot takes a while to fully adjust? I think we've said the bottom line is you got a guy like Marcus who can help guide him. You got a guy on the floor with him in RJ who's been through it. And I think also you just accept and know right now that you're just going to take those and work through them together as a team and know that they might come. Well, Pac, I think we're off and running with our first ever What If Wednesday. I cannot wait to find out what question comes out of our What If Wednesday bowl next. We're going to look into that in just a second. But first, I need to tell you that this episode of Locked On Tar Heels is brought to you by our friends at Bird Dogs. I'm rocking the hat today, Pac, that free Bird Dogs hat. I'm going to pull it low right now where you can't even see my eyes. You don't know what I'm thinking. Folks, I got to tell you, shorts and pants have always been something I just don't think too terribly much about. But that was before I ever put on a pair of Bird Dogs. And holy cow, let me tell you that now I think a lot more about shorts and pants because these Bird Dogs are so stinking comfortable that I want to be wearing them all the time. I wear them whenever I go to the gym because it's so comfortable and flexible to work out in that it just is incredible. But Bird Dogs are also perfect for any occasion, personal or professional or anywhere in between. Bird Dog shorts just fit way better than regular shorts made of stiff, restricting cotton. And perhaps my favorite thing is that Bird Dogs uses this anti-stink sweat-wicking fabric that keeps me cool and dry all day long. So go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege or enter promo code lockedoncollege at checkout for a free Bird Dogs water bottle with your order. That's birddogs.com/lockedoncollege for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take off your Bird Dogs. We promise you that. Folks, I want to remind you that coming up this Friday from 11 a.m. till noon Eastern on every Locked On YouTube page is Locked On College Football Kickoff Live, getting you ready for this weekend of football as the Tar Heels try to stay undefeated 5-0 as they host Syracuse. All right, Pac, here we go. Second question. Our first one's answered. Boom, let's get that out of there. Man, that wow. I Thank you. I appreciate that. What late night host is it that tosses things like that? Is it Fallon?
I think it is Powell, yeah.
All right, here's our next one. Pac, this one says, what if UNC doesn't use its depth early on in the season? Ooh, this is something we've experienced the first 2 years under Coach Davis, not using much depth. Is it, after year one, it's a small sample size. You don't know if that was just because the talent that there wasn't that first year. And then ahead of his second year, Coach Davis said he was going to use that bench more. And Pac, I think it's safe to say he still didn't. And so the question now becomes, you think you've got, at least on paper, your most talented team of the Hubert Davis era. So what if UNC doesn't use its depth early on in the season?
This brings up a lot of hard feelings.
I know. I'm like, ee.
The first thing that I think of is, since we just talked about it, is Elliot Cadeau. Assuming that he plays the amount that we think he'll play, we can't afford for him to not adjust quickly if we're not going to use our depth. He becomes all the more important. And so I think that becomes a big deal. I think it becomes a big deal team chemistry-wise. We got a lot of these guys in here, either in the recruiting class or through the portal, to come in here and help us. And if they don't come in here and help us and coach doesn't allow them to come off the bench and contribute, that's going to ruffle some feathers. And I think that's going to make things really, really tough. And then also, if we're not using our depth, then I just don't think we're maximizing our potential. We've got depth. We've got a chance to wear teams down, tire teams out, keep fresh bodies on the floor without dropping off a ton, in my opinion. And I would love to see us have those, and I've talked about this a million times before, the clearly defined roles, and let players come into those, be comfortable with those, succeed in those, use our depth to wear teams out, and take advantage of the amount of bodies and good basketball players that we have at North Carolina that a lot of programs aren't privileged to have.
Yeah.
And, the last thing for me is, if we don't use that depth, what does that mean for us? Does that mean that we're having another transfer portal heavy offseason? I don't want that. I want us to have continuity and guys that we can connect to as a fan base and guys that our program can build upon. And it's not that I don't want us to use the transfer portal at all. I think it's a necessity.
Yeah.
But I do want us to have mainstays too. I don't want it to be massive turnover every offseason. And so I hope that we can find a way to use that depth, not only for success, but also to keep these kids, these young men in our program more than just the 1 year and see you later.
Yeah. My direct answer to the question, I already threw the card away. What happens if UNC doesn't use its depth early in the season? I think we get some of what we saw towards the end of that championship run 2 years ago, where guys, I honestly, I know Carolina was playing its best basketball down the stretch, but it felt like the guys were just starting to break down. And I think it's that again. I just think failure to use your depth early on will have exponential ramifications negative later on in the season, where what if a guy gets hurt? You don't have somebody that you already know and trust can come in and perform. What if, if these guys are averaging 30 minutes a game, they're not going to be able to come in and be efficient or know like, hey, I can go hard for a 5-minute stretch, go catch a breather, let somebody else come in and play like that and so I love you going back to the question of role definition, Pac, because it really is so critical. And here's the thing for me, and I think this might be I think people might like what I'm about to say, but when rubber meets the road with it, I don't think that a lot of people do like it. And here's what I mean. I know we all want to see early season wins, particularly in the marquee non-conference games. But I would take a couple early losses or a couple early games that are closer than maybe they should be if it means getting guys reps and minutes and role definition so that they're ready when conference play comes. And that doesn't even have to be in the heat of the game, although I would love that. But like one thing I'd like to see Coach Davis do a little differently is let's get the bench guys in earlier. Like in games that are out of question already, whether we're blowing somebody out or getting blown out, like let's get those guys minutes. And so ultimately for me, I think it's an opportunity to just find out what you have. Now, part of the issue is with a 20-game conference schedule and all these built-in non-con things that you are committed to now, like Jumpman Invitational, ACC, SEC, any of that kind of stuff, you only get like Carolina only has 4 bye games this year, Pac, 3 right out of the gate, and then 1 more right before conference play starts up when you go on the road to Pitt. Is that the first? Yeah, it's either Pitt or Clemson are the first 2 like main chunk ACC games. And so failure to find your depth early on is going to maybe not hurt you in the short term, but I think it ultimately hurts Carolina in the long term.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I like what you said earlier about getting guys in and letting them get reps, even if it means a win is maybe a little closer than it should be. And I just want to add to that from my experience, like it's not always about getting reps. As important as that is, I'm not taking away from that. Sometimes it's about gaining confidence. It's about seeing what you have. Like, yeah, you might already know what Trimble can do, but if he goes and does it on the floor in front of 20,000 Carolina fans and he hears that crowd erupt, boom, there goes that confidence. And then you start to see it take place more and more and more and more. And that's when you see that growth in these players. And so I would really like to see us try to tap into that more than we have the last couple of years.
Whew, okay. Hopefully Coach Williams is in Coach Davis's ear on that a little bit. And I guess that's something I need to I'm always trying to reckon with this. Do I want it to be a certain way because that's how Coach Williams did it and I just don't like change? Or do I want it to be a certain way because I think it's actually better? And in this case, I recognize there is a little bit of both, right? Like it's been a hard right turn from how Coach Williams handled depth to how Coach Davis does. But I do think that it's better for the team. I really just do. Well, Pac, we got one more What If Wednesday question to pull out. Who knows what it's going to be? We'll get there in just a second. But first, I need to tell you all that this episode of Locked On Tar Heels is brought to you by FanDuel. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. I might like to also add that I'm undefeated right now in fantasy football. Thank you very much. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use, and you can bet on all sorts of stuff. Spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, Pac, let me get out this What If Wednesday bowl for us one more time. We got some more cards in here, tossing them around, and let's see what we can pull out. All right, Pac, this one says, what if the Tar Heels go 0-3 against Tennessee, UConn, and Kentucky? Before we got the ACC schedule, that was 3 games in a row. Now Florida State's right in between Tennessee and UConn. But Pat, in what you said earlier is a very difficult non-con schedule. This to me is probably the toughest 3-game stretch. And I guess some of that's depending on who you play in Atlantis, who shows up for Carolina. But boy, Pac, that Tennessee team, assuming that Zakai Ziegler is back and healthy, is going to be insanely difficult. I think top 10 level good. Same with UConn, although they just got some tough news about Donovan Clingan potentially being out for a month. Hopefully he's back and healthy. You never want to see these kids hurt. And then Kentucky, while they had a tumultuous offseason, have a cavalcade of incredible freshmen coming in and got back several guys thanks to West Virginia and thanks to Antonio Reeves deciding not to go in the draft. So, Pac, what if the Tar Heels don't win any of those games? And they have a history of doing so in the last couple years.
Well, for one, if we don't win any of those games, that's going to hurt a lot. Because I don't really care for any of those 3 programs. But, here's the real reality of it, in my opinion. Hubert Davis, since he's taken over as head coach, does not have a marquee regular season non-conference win. Okay, he's got some good wins in the regular season.
Ooh, people are checking you in real time right now, Pac. I hear people flying to the schedule.
Yeah, particularly, at Duke. That's a conference game.
That's right.
He's got a couple big wins against Michigan.
But as you said, not marquee.
It's not like big time. It's not. Those are good wins, but it doesn't feel like a huge win.
Oh, they should have beaten Alabama last year. That's the one I keep going
That
back.
would have been big. But if we can go beat a Tennessee, like you said, all 3 of these teams are potential top 10 teams. UConn, right. Tennessee, Kentucky. We go win one of those. That's that marquee win we've been looking for. So if we go 0-3 against those, that's just going to continue to add to that knock of, man, we really struggle in the non-conference under Hubert Davis. Or, man, this is just really going to be a struggle of a season, isn't it? And it's going to raise up all those questions that all of us, whether we admit to it or not, we kind of have in the back of our head. And so that really scares me with that, although I do feel like we'll go win at least 1 or 2 of these. But, here's the other thought I have on it. And if you guys remember, last year, the big knock on Carolina not making the NCAA tournament was not enough quad 1 wins. And we're going to need to stack those up and build that resume up if we want to make the tournament. And not just make the tournament, but if we want to get a good seed. If we want to have
I don't want to just go to the dance. I want to be wearing a suit that's awesome and everyone thinks I look great.
Exactly. You want to go in there in your orange and blue tux like Lord Christmas from Dumb and Dumber, baby. But really, I mean, we want to have a chance.
Looking like Blippi.
Yeah. We want to have that chance to make a real run at it and have an advantageous bracket. And so those 3 games are all the more important. And if we go 0-3, that's going to be tough. And it makes the battle for Atlantis very important.
That's true.
It makes the Jumpman Invitational very important, almost must-win type games.
But the problem is that you're playing Oklahoma in the Jumpman Invitational. I don't think they're that great.
True. No, that's a great point.
I mean, then you never know, right? Like, we'll get into the season, we'll see. But I just don't think they're going to be that good.
Yeah, I agree. But nonetheless, still one we can't afford to drop.
That's right. 100%.
We lose that one, it's going to hurt us even more. Like, wow, these guys lost those 3 and they lost to Oklahoma. And they're going to say every Power 5 non-conference that we played, we struggled in, And so we've got to have those resume builders. And 0-3 in these games would be an absolute tough blow. And it also is concerning because it means we're not clicking yet, And it's not that losing to those 3 teams is just the end of the world. Those are 3 really good teams, like we mentioned. But if we go 0-3 in those games, then something's not right. And there's a chance of that. I think we forget that a lot of these guys are coming from the portal. This will be their first year to go through a season together. This isn't like these guys have been playing together for 4 straight years, even though we do have a lot of veteran leadership on the team. And so there's a chance that, we don't get right out of the gate running as fast as we can and that we drop some games early, but it's still concerning nonetheless. What do you think?
It really, and I don't want to sound contradictory to what I just said in the last segment about like playing depth, and I'm okay with taking a loss or 2. Like, yeah, that is still true, but you cannot afford, as you've said, to go 0-3 in these games, especially knowing like, I said that these are 3 out of 4 games in a row with Florida State wedged in. Atlantis is right before the Tennessee game. And the last 2 games of that could be Villanova and Arkansas, who also are top 15, top 10 type teams this year. So you got a stretch of 5 games out of 6 where you're playing again, depending on how the bracket breaks down in Atlantis. I mean, this is a stretch right here, Pac, that could honestly make or break how the eye test feel, what people think about you from the eye test and what the metrics all say about you, what the analytics all say about you. And so you don't want to mess around with this at all. And so, which, by the way, I should say about the analytics and metrics, for those of you that like to keep up with that kind of stuff, Andy Patton and I are going to have Ken Palm on the Locked On College Basketball podcast tomorrow on Thursday. So make sure you check that out. Anyway, Pac, like I'm with you. I think like in a realistic world, I just don't see Carolina dropping all 3 of these games. But then you look back and think to last year where they lost to Iowa State, Alabama, Indiana, then Virginia Tech, 4 in a row right there. I think you and I talked about that last week on the schedule reveal show. And there's a very real world where you do lose all 3 of these. And I think to answer the question, what if the Tar Heels go 0-3? I think the nation gives up on the Tar Heels. The AP voters give up on the Tar Heels, and you got a big old hole to climb out of, and you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself to overperform in ACC play, where you probably got to go 17-3 to feel like you got a really good seed, like you were talking about. And I just don't think that's a position, especially given the past 4 years of North Carolina outside of the championship run, where people already think not great things about you as a program right now. You got to prove them wrong. This stretch plus Battle for Atlantis is a great opportunity to do that.
Yeah, you're right. And I like what you brought up about where things could potentially turn if we do drop these games. That's the part that really scares me, is not just what does that look like for the NCAA tournament. What are people talking about our team, or what are they thinking when they talk about our team? Is, I foresee a lot of questions around Hubert Davis's job. I foresee a lot of pressure on him. I foresee a lot of pressure on the players, and I think it could turn really sour. And obviously we hope not, and we don't think that's going to happen. But history does suggest over Hubert Davis's first 2 years that November and December are not his best months, and we really need for him to prove us wrong in that, and or not really prove us wrong. I believe in him, and just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean that it won't.
But it's time to prove that narrative wrong.
It's time to prove that narrative wrong, exactly. Right. And I hope that we go and do that.
Pac, it's been a great first ever What If Wednesday. I love it. I think we should do it again next Wednesday. See what happens. We can start thinking of some more what ifs. Folks, once again, we would love for your what ifs. We can throw them in our bucket and get to them in future weeks. If you'd like to contribute to that, again, you can do that. Come join the Discord. The link for that is in the show notes. You can drop us a line on email, lockedontarheels@gmail.com. You can DM the show on Twitter or Pac or me, lockedonheels at Coach _K23 or me at Isaac Schade. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the show, smash the like button. You everydayers, we want to thank you as always for coming to tune in with us. It's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll be right back with you tomorrow. But until then, peace.